What's up? How you doing? Here we are. Beautiful night tonight. Beautiful night. And it's late. It's almost the next day. It's like midnight. And midnight is when the day begins. So we're almost into Thursday. Fresh cup of tea. Lipton just made it. Delicious. That'll be the final one of the night, of the day. Completing it. Lipton is delicious. So today I was thinking about the universe, and maybe I mentioned this before, maybe I haven't, but Voyager 2 has finally reached, on November 16th 2025, finally reached one light day away from us. So it takes light 24 hours to get from Earth to Voyager 2 and 24 hours to get back to us. And it's just mind-boggling, or at least it boggles the mind, that from 1977, almost 50 years ago, 48 years ago, 1977, traveling at 38,000 miles per hour, 24/7, and it just now has reached one light day away from us. And one light day is nothing. You know, I mean, it's far if you're driving a Pinto, but on the scale of what the universe is, it's nothing. It's nothing. I mean, 4.2 light years from here is the next star, and that's not one light day. That's 4.2 years of traveling at the speed of light. And that's our neighbor. So I mean, space, that's why they call it space, has a lot of space. And then you read something like all the grains of sand on our planet, and that includes all the beaches, all the deserts, right? So the Sahara, the Mojave, all of them, all the sand. If you count all the little grains, there are more stars than there are grains of sand on this planet, which I can't wrap my mind around it. So I was reading somewhere where we have, what is it, like 4 quadrillion grains of sand on this planet, but the universe has 6 septillion stars. So crazy. I mean, if you took 1 grain of sand and put it on each star, you wouldn't have enough. You wouldn't have enough. Now, if you see videos of the Sahara and the amount of sand, you would think a bucket, like a barrel full of sand, would be as many stars that are in the universe, but it's not. The place is crazy. The place is crazy. I can't stop thinking about it. You know what really gets me? Yes, the size gets me, but what is it inside of? What is the universe held inside of? And then if there's multiverses, that really gets crazy. Multiverses of infinitely big universes. And then you wonder, is this the prime reality, or is there another prime reality that oversees this stuff? Is the universe a teeny weeny little, you know, blinking light in the distance of the prime reality? I find it weird. Everything, like, the more you learn, the stranger it gets. But you know, I'm really doubting this whole thing with the Big Bang. I think the Big Bang is nonsense in terms of everything coming from nothing. It's even tough to explain, but nothing existing before that, nothing except nothing. And then all of a sudden there's some kind of an explosion and matter appears, right? I don't even know how they figured that. If you don't know the actual size, I'm going to say this again. It sounds like a broken record, but if you don't know the actual size of the universe, how can you reverse engineer how old it is? And then once you figure out that, how do you figure out, you know, that a Big Bang created it? Just because things are pushing apart from each other, you know, that could be like, you know, something is always there and things constantly move apart, you know, and then maybe they pull back together. Maybe at some point the push is overwhelmed by the gravitational force and things start coming together and they go out again, boom, 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 you know. And the only reason we know about it now is because we have the technology to pick that up. But I don't see a Big Bang. I mean, it's just, for me, it seems asinine, the Big Bang. Plus, if you think the universe is infinite, then how do you reverse it back to being 13.8 billion years old? If it's infinite, it wouldn't be 13.8, right? Infinite universes have infinite time that they've existed. But the older I get, the more the Big Bang Theory appears to be a fairy tale, Three Little Pigs thing. You know, I think one day they're going to discover that the universe has always been, has never had a beginning, and will never have an end. It just has always existed. The material, the matter that makes it up has always been around in some form or another. It recycles, you know, and that whole thing, something from nothing, I think is nonsense. People say that, it doesn't mean anything though. Something from nothing. How do you know that there was nothing, that the something came from? Maybe there was something always, and that made the other stuff, you know. But I don't know, the older I get, that Big Bang thing is probably BS. And eventually scientists are going to come around and say the exact same thing I'm saying right now. Plus the way they describe it, how would you even know that? They say it was the size of depending on who you hear. Some of them say the size of a coffee table. Some say the universe was the size of a bowling ball. Some of them say a ping pong ball. Everybody's got their own thing. Some of them say you could fit it on the head of a needle or a pin. And just from that alone, they're making it up. You wouldn't know that. How would you know that? How would you know how big the universe was when a Big Bang supposedly happened? Might have been the size of planet Earth. But to tell me that the universe that contains more stars in it than we have grains of sand was able to be, you know, you were able to fit it into the size of a bowling ball or something, is asinine. It really is. It's asinine. Even if you take all the atoms and scrunch them together, right? How many of those can you scrunch together before the pinhead is filled? So, you know, I mean, I think they're going to have to revise this one. And it's not the first time. Science always revises. That's the whole thing of science. You know, you keep making discoveries and you keep adjusting your theories. But when they tell me that the Big Bang occurred at some point 13.8 billion years ago, prior to that everything was condensed into a tiny, 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 tiny area, that's once again ridiculous. I think if you took our sun and condensed it, you can only go so far in condensing, right? We know liquids are hard to condense, but you can only go so far. How small can you make the sun? Can you make it a tenth of the size? Maybe. But is that tenth of the size a pinhead? No. And that's one star. So they're trying to tell us that trillions of galaxies, at least two that we know of, right? 2 trillion galaxies, were squished together at some point to fit inside a little tiny area, the size of a pinhead, or even a coffee table. And then there was a massive explosion. All of that is just fairy tales, you know. Nobody knows that to be true. Even if you see the universe, you know, the galaxies expanding away from each other, moving away from each other, that doesn't mean the universe is expanding. You know, they always use the example, like if I cook a cake a raisin cake or something, and I put the raisins on top. As the cake expands, the raisins move apart and further away from each other. But you can also make the argument that the cake is one size and there's ladybugs on top, and the ladybugs just move around rather than the cake itself expanding. So I don't know who came up with this thing that the universe is expanding. Maybe the universe is, but maybe also that the galaxies are moving within that space. So it's not like, so it's basically the space moving, and that pulls the galaxies apart. Because we know Andromeda, or what they tell us, I don't know if we actually know this, because I've read contradicting reports that Andromeda is actually moving away from us. So it's never going to collide with us. But if you take the idea that the universe is expanding, and that's why the galaxies are moving away from each other, then why are they moving towards each other in this case? Right? You have the expansion. Andromeda should be moving further away from Earth, or the Milky Way. Like I said, I don't think the Big Bang Theory is going to hold water in the future. I think a couple hundred years from now, they'll be laughing at this theory and going, remember when the humans thought that the universe fit inside of a small area the size of, you pick whatever, whatever object you want to talk about, a bowling ball, tennis ball, whatever. And they're going to say that was ridiculous. Now we know that the universe always existed, which I think is probably more likely than not. I don't think our reality is 13.8 billion years. I think it's, no measure of time. It's always been. Always been. I know our mind can't comprehend always been, but it always has been, I believe. I take that on faith, and I think it'll always be. It'll always exist. Otherwise, it would have been gone by now, because if you're always existing by now, there should have been a point where you used up all of the energy and you no longer exist, but we're still here. Therefore, there's got to be a process where either we recycle or new matter is formed somehow. And it's okay to say you don't know how. You don't have to create stuff to explain. If you don't know, you don't know. Don't say, oh, well, it happened, this way. Just say, I don't know how it happened. We're not advanced enough to know how this stuff happened. It might take another 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 500 years, we don't know. I'm waiting for the extraterrestrials to make contact with us somehow. I believe, and once again, this is on faith because I've never seen one in real life, but I believe that they're out there. It can't be that life came to be just here. Out of all the space that we have, out of all the stars that contain planets, just us, we're the only game in town. That's hard to believe. And I'm talking about intelligent life. I'm not talking about microbes. There's gotta be. I know there's a new Steven Spielberg movie coming out next year, and it's about UFOs. So I am very excited. I'm a Spielberg fan, and I'm also a Close Encounters fan, which he directed. I loved that movie. When that movie came out, told my father, I said, want to go see a movie? You want to take me? And he said, sure. So we ended up going to see this movie, and I was blown away. I'm just fascinated by the whole idea about other life out there that's intelligent, especially if they're more advanced than us. I mean, okay, fine, it's interesting to find something that's primitive, but imagine finding something that's, 1,000,000 years ahead of us. So, every time I look at the SETI website, I want to see something like fascinating, like we've detected video. We've picked up some images from, a galaxy a couple of billion light years from here, and look at this. They have sitcoms. But to think that we're the only ones, You know, that's a hard pill to swallow, because I don't think it's true. There is some guys, a scientist, like British young guy, and he always puts the argument out. I don't know if he believes the argument, but he may believe it, you know. But he always puts the argument out that he believes we're the only, or we could be the only ones, not just the galaxy but the universe. And I find that a bit arrogant. We're the only ones. But you know, I've been looking at life, you know, as if I'm a visitor. You know, like looking at like I popped in from somewhere, and I've looked around. And I go, wow, this stuff is here. There's actual intelligent life walking around. But you know, we're gonna find someday. I think we're gonna find that we're one of many. We're one of many in different stages of development, and that life forms do exist out there. We just haven't found them yet. And maybe they use totally different technology than what we use. But I wait. It's my passion. My passion. I would love to open up, you know, the TV or something, and see special report like the old days. And they say, SETI just released these images. Now, I'm not really expecting them to visit, unless, I don't know, they figured out a way to, you know, cut the distance down to nothing. But I think that's one of the issues, the distance, very far. Very far. I mean, our neighbors are far. And our galaxy, between galaxies, is far. Like from here, Milky Way to Andromeda, is 2.5 million years traveling at the speed of light. That's crazy. So, but like I said, ever since I was little, I've been thinking about the universe. I've been thinking about intelligent life, fascinated by it. I've mentioned this before, but when I was in the 5th grade, we would get Scholastic, and it was a little, like, you know, like a newspaper, but it was one sheet, and you'd open it up, and it had all these books that you could buy. And I always bought 3 because they gave you a free poster of Benji or something. So I bought 3, and then one time I opened it up, and it had a little book, and it had a flying saucer on the front. It was called Earth's Hidden Mysteries, and you can look it up. It's a real book. And I went and I bought it. I was fascinated. I went home, and I had a neighbor who was fascinated with the UFO stuff. He was an old man back then. And I went to his place and knocked on the door, and he let me in. And I said, look what I got. And he's like, oh. So sat down at the table at night, and he started reading the chapter on UFOs. And I felt like the whole world had shut off all the noise, and it was just me and him. And I was just listening to him read, and my imagination drifted into the story. And he was as fascinated as I was, so he kept reading. But even as a young kid, I was always interested in what's out there. What's out there? You know, what are we? What's going on here? You know, I don't think there's much of an answer to the what's going on part. Like, I don't think there's any special meaning. It's like we exist. We make the meaning we make by the way we live our lives. But I don't think we're here for any special reason. You know, I mean, that's just, you know, wishful thinking that, oh, we're here for a project. But we are here. We are the most intelligent animal on the planet. That's why we dominate. We're primates. You know, a lot of people, they don't want to think of us as primates, but that's what we are. And you know, we're made up of cells. DNA dictates, you know, the behavior of what goes on, the genes, and it's just weird. You know, they talk about free will and all that stuff, but, you know, how free are you when you're kind of like bound by your genetics for the most part. The way you think, the way you behave, what you like, what you don't like. You know, people think liking something and not liking something is a choice, but there are people that don't like onions. That's the choice. You know, you wake up one day and say, I don't like those onions. Either you like them or you don't. You know, you don't like cilantro, you like cilantro. Those are all genetic stuff. The ability to analyze. Some people are good at it, some people are horrible. Some people, you tell them some bogus story and immediately they believe it. No analyzing, nothing. They just buy into it because their brains can't analyze. You know, some people are great at math. Some people, no matter how hard they try, they don't know what 3 times 3 is. I know it's 9. So, you know, we're bound by our DNA, our genes, our genetics. Our brain can only be a certain way, and the choices you make are based on the brain you have. So you kind of limited. If you're limited at all, maybe you're not limited. You just don't have any kind of choice. So there's no limit. It's just that you're bound by your, you know, your brain that you're born with, and you don't have a choice on that. But they always, you know, religion likes to point to the choice. Hey, what choice? You know, what you like and what you don't like, the colors you like, the music you like, all that stuff is kind of like the way your brain operates, and you have no choice over that. But yeah, ever since I was little, I was always, my big question back then was, like, I could picture myself reaching the edge of where the universe, you know, begins, and then hitting a wall made out of some kind of thick iron, and I'm there trying to, you know, with a pick, trying to break out. But no matter how you think about it, even if you traveled fast enough from here, even if somehow you appeared or you were born at the edge of the universe, right? Let's say it's a limited universe. What's after that? And after that, and after that? You can play that game forever. You know, there's no end to what's after that, what's after that. Once you pass the Earth, you keep going and going. Okay, now I'm at the edge of the universe. What's after that? What's the universe held in? Or what's the universe expanding into, if you want to believe in the expansion theory? Okay, what's after that? What's after that? What's after that? You know, the after that thing never stops. It keeps going. That's why it's weird that we actually exist, because no matter what, there's always something after that. You know, and if there isn't, then why? I mean, what happens? You know, I mean, even empty space. What's after the empty space? Does it go on forever? I mean, how does that even work if there's a beginning? You know, that's why I don't believe in the beginning part. You know, Big Bang and all that. I mean, how do you go from a beginning to infinity? You don't. There's no such thing as having a start and then eventually turning into infinite. It's like, yeah, we start off the size of a bowling ball, but now we're infinite in size. And I remember something funny. I thought it was funny. Neil deGrasse Tyson said, I like Degrassi. Sounds better to me. Neil deGrasse Tyson. But anyway, he said that some infinities are bigger than others. And he goes, I know that doesn't make sense, but that's how it is. And I said, no, it's not that it doesn't make sense. It's just BS. Some infinities are bigger than others. Infinite means it goes on forever, and something that goes on forever plus one doesn't mean anything. So that's that. Sometimes I will go into the desert. One time I was in the desert not too long ago. It was late at night. I was there with my kids, and it was a clear night. We were just looking up into the universe, and I was thinking, so when you see a picture in a book, say the picture's like the page is that big and our galaxy is like, you know, right there. If you take a dime and put it over that picture on the edge of the galaxy, that's pretty much our night sky. So that little dime, when you look up on a dark night where there's no light pollution, that's all the stars we see, and they're all within that dime. And that's a small area. But really, I hope in my lifetime there's some kind of contact or some kind of message or image that we can see that we've received from some other part of the galaxy. So yeah, I've always been interested in physics, astronomy, all that stuff. And sometimes it frustrates me, so I have to stop thinking about it when I start like going in a loop. I do not like the loop. But my loop is always like, what's at the edge, what's at the end of the universe, what's the universe held inside of, what's it expanding into, that kind of stuff constantly on my mind. And where's the intelligent life out there? Anyway, that's it for now. Ciao.